Hello, friends. This is your host, Tillery Timmons-Sims. Welcome back to Conservation Stories. This is a podcast that's hosted by the Sand Hill Area Research Association. And I am excited today because we actually have someone in studio, face-to-face conversation. I am excited to talk to Aric Denton about all kinds of things about produced water. And we've had some conversations about produced water here on the podcast before. We've spoken to Mike Hightower. He is the head of the Produced Water Consortium in New Mexico. And then we had conversation with Senator Perry, who is all things water and he's very excited about produced water and what can happen there. So I know just enough about produced water, Aric, to be dangerous. So give us a little bit of your background first and kind of tell us about yourself and your education and all that kind of stuff.
I grew up in Big Spring, Texas, about 100 miles from here.
Know right where that is.
So I grew up farming.
Grew up on the farm.
Yeah, grow cotton I think they got up to 5,000 acres at one point. So
yeah,
pretty good size by the time I graduated high school.
Yes.
And so I've been around like the oil field quite a bit because, there was lots of oil on the land we farmed for other people. And I think my parents did a little bit and just in that world a lot.
Yes. Yes.
I remember when I was little, we lived on the farm and there were some tank batteries there and the pumper would come by every day and I'd go get in the truck with him and ride around.
Yes. Yeah. We lived out towards Gaines County. So I don't know if that's familiar to you, but like out there, kind of on the boundary line of Terry County and Gaines County. And we had all kinds of oil traffic because we had one of the only paved roads because the county commissioner lived out there. It was nice. So, yeah. So we had a paved road. And so, they flew up and down that road all day long.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. It never ends.
Yeah.
When the oil field really started picking up in, 2006, 2008, somewhere in there, suddenly our really, silent, quiet corner of the world, people driving by and 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, wake you up.
Yeah.
Just like when they put up all the wind turbines that were blinking would keep us awake.
Oh, my
Because we were just so used to being dead and quiet out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But on those wells there at the house, there was an injection well there for the produced water from those two pumps there.
Yes.
And over the years, those wells were drilled in the 80s.
Yes.
So they weren't making much. But by the time I got old enough to kind of know anything about it, that injection well had sort of permeated into that formation and basically those wells were just making the water again. It had pushed more water. I mean, I think initially the idea was to water flood and push some of the oil that way.
Yes.
This was long before fracking and before some of the modern methods. But they were just producing water. They might make a barrel a day on a 10,000 foot well and then, 40, 50 barrels of water a day.
Right.
And they were just kind of going in a circle. Finally, they started hauling it off.
Yeah.
I remember when I was little, that injection well started leaking on the surface.
Oh, yes.
And they spent, I don't know how much time cleaning it up. And I thought,
that was good. At least they did. They cleaned it up.
Well, we made them clean it up. It was in our cotton field.
Okay.
And like half a mile from our house.
Yes.
So it's not stuff you want around.
No, it is not.
So it's some really nasty water.
Yes. We just finished a campaign on encouraging people to just at least take notice about what our regulations are in the state of Texas for energy waste, which is very little. So some of that could use some updating.
I agree. And I think the Railroad Commission kind of agrees. So I've talked with them a little bit and they are getting ready to maybe they've already started restricting some of the zones that people can inject into.
Okay.
Which is going to cause a major issue, I think, in the long run with finding somewhere to put all this water.
Right.
So a lot of people like to blame the issues we're having in West Texas on the fracking. And I'm sure that can have some issues, but the volume of water they're fracking with is not, don't get me wrong, it's a ton of water, but it's not enough to be causing these issues.
Right.
Because when they frack a vertical well, they may go through 250,000 barrels of water or more.
Right.
On one well, but that's not, in the grand scheme of things, and geologically, not very much water.
Right.
But if you've got, 500 wells all producing water all day long every day.
Yes.
And then you pump all that water to an injection site, maybe not 500 to one, but
you
have tons of them.
Right.
And this single well where they're injecting is pumping in 10 to 50,000 barrels of water a day for years. That starts to add up to a lot of mass shift.
Yes.
And the pressure too, of course, is, permeating, but it's just a lot of mass you're physically moving around.
Right. Yes, I know. I see it all the time. Every time there's like some, small earthquake or anything like that, it's like fracking. And I'm like, well, actually, I mean, it's a side effect, I guess you could say, a consequence of having the water that is coming out of fracking. But do you think? What is your thoughts on? Because we're bringing in a lot of stuff from New Mexico. So when New Mexico, and they will be deciding to keep their water and not bring it in anymore because they're building a market for produced water. Yeah. So is that going to automatically cut us down a lot?
I can't imagine it make a huge difference. So if you look at a map of the Permian Basin, about a little less than a quarter of it is in New Mexico, but we still have a lot of it in West Texas. Right. It goes all the way down, to Pecos and towards El Paso, really down into San Angelo, even that direction is where that major Permian Basin field is.
There's so much there though about Hobbs and my goodness, a lot. Yeah. So, just for our listeners' sake, we talked about you being on the farm. Give us a little bit about your background. You are here at Texas Tech and you're studying to be a doctor.
Yes. So I've been at Texas Tech far longer than I'd like to admit. So,
that's what happens when you're going to be a doctor.
So I started in undergrad in chemical engineering.
Okay.
And I've done my master's and now about to finish my PhD.
Okay.
God willing.
Yes.
In chemical engineering.
Okay.
So my actual research for my PhD was partially in polymer material science, but also in energetic materials research. So we did high explosives research for the Department of Defense.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't really quite translate to dealing with produced water very well.
Well, it kind of does. I mean, like there's stuff in produced water that...
Yeah. So a lot of our work is studying like crystallization and how crystals form and how you can manipulate them to make them, different phases of the same crystal or different polymorphs or into different, trying to make them amorphous. So kind of like window glass or plastic, be able to make it at room temperature be amorphous. Some of that, I think, I've been able to translate into one of our possible routes where we want to go, and I'll get into that in a little while. Okay,
interesting. So what we discussed just a little bit on the podcast with Mike Hightower, people probably have heard that by now, is there's not just salt in this water. There's a lot of things in there, and there's not always the same things. It's different according to where they've drilled. So not only do you have the issue of cleaning it, then you have an issue of what's coming out of it, which when you're thinking in circular economies, you don't ever think of something as waste. You think of something as another market.
Exactly. So I've been wondering for years and years. I mean, me and my grandpa talked about this when I was in like junior high school. He was a chemist at the refinery in Big Spring.
Okay.
So I kind of been around that world.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Kind of an inspiration to go into chemical engineering.
Yes.
When they desalinate water, they'll desalinate seawater in California. Israel, almost all of its water is desalinated water, I think, from the Red Sea. What do you do with all the salt?
Right.
Do you just make a big mountain in Utah somewhere? What do you do with it?
Right.
And I got to thinking about that a couple of years ago when I was partly during the pandemic. I didn't have anything to do. Campus was closed. We couldn't do research. Can't take explosives home with me to work on. So I had a lot of time to ruminate on things.
Right. Oh my goodness.
And so I got to thinking about it as we're seeing more like a stronger push into EVs and into batteries, power storage for grid storage. I was kind of thinking, well, we have all this produced water. I wonder if there's any lithium in it. I was kind of the extent initially of my thoughts. Is there lithium in it?
Yeah.
And so I went and got a couple of samples and had them tested, and it's not the richest.
Right. Because that's really
lithium brine.
East Texas, right, is where there's more lithium, I think, in there.
There's some there. They found a lot of it in Arkansas and in Nevada.
Okay.
In Nevada, there's a ton of it. It's not in the produced water. It's in different regions and like geothermal areas.
Okay. Okay.
In Arkansas, I think ExxonMobil is working on developing a lithium economy there.
Oh, okay.
Pull it out.
Okay.
Because it's kind of the low-hanging fruit.
Okay.
Right. It's got, they have concentrations close to, 1,000 parts per million or 3,000. It's a lot. It's mostly, that would end up being not mostly lithium, but a really high percentage.
A high percentage of its lithium.
Of the salt. So I tested some here and we're seeing, it varies from, some of it has none lithium-wise. Some of it has, highest I've seen is 40 or 50 parts per million.
Okay.
Which at the prices a couple of years ago for lithium, if you did the math on it, that was when it was at $78,000 a ton for lithium carbonate. For some of the best water I tested, it was about $2.73 worth of lithium per barrel.
Okay.
Now that's not how much it would cost to get it out. I mean, it depends on the method. But considering you're talking about 10,000 barrels a day on a medium to small size disposal well, well, it's a pretty big extra revenue stream when they're already oil companies are already having to pay the disposal well to pump that water down.
Right.
Get rid of it.
They have to get rid of it anyway.
Yeah. And they're having to pay to dispose of it. I don't know what the going rate is now. In the past, it's been, from 10 to 50 cents a barrel. So this potentially be worth more than just the disposal fee.
Yes.
Just the lithium in this kind of low-hanging, or it's not the low-hanging fruit, it's the harder to get to.
Hard to get to for us, yeah.
For here.
For here.
And here's where we have a big issue with it.
Right.
I started thinking about, well, what else is in there? And I haven't done a complete comprehensive test because there's too many things. I'm working on getting an instrument to do that with, but there's basically everything in there. Everything.
Yeah, and New Mexico State has identified all of that pretty much. I mean, it's all listed out there, and it's a lot. But it's not all in everything, and in every barrel. Every barrel is, every bit is different because if it's coming out of, they're injecting and putting this water in one space, but it's coming from wells that are in different geographical locations, and so that means it kind of
they're from different depths.
Mixes it up.
They're different distances from the mountains in New Mexico. 'Cause a lot of that water, a lot of it was from the Permian Sea that was here, prehistoric times. But a lot of that water has filtered, like basically from the mountains of New Mexico across the Permian Basin and underground. And I mean, that took many thousands of years to do that. And it doesn't really replenish that I know of. I'm not a geologist, so I'm not super well versed on that side, but a lot of that water, so it's picked up a lot of stuff along the way, and that depth, the depth that it's at, has a lot of effect on when it's going to pick up. One of the big things that I'm a little concerned about. So there's a company, I can't remember the name of them. They're around the Pecos area, or they're disposing in the Pecos River. They got the EPA gave them a temporary license to clean this water up and dump, I think, maybe 600,000 gallons. I mean, it's not much. In the grand scheme of things, that's right. They're allowing them to, as like a pilot program, to see if this is a marketable way to do this. And one of the things I kind of worry about is some of the things like radium, for example, is a radioactive element. There's not an EPA guideline for things like that, for water quality, because that doesn't normally exist in water. You don't normally see radium. I mean, there's refined radium, depending on the isotope. There's maybe a few pounds of it refined on the planet because there's no use for it. They used to, the radium girls, would paint watch dials with it. But really, since then, there's not a lot of use for radium. And that is in quite a bit of the water. There's uranium in the water. There's a lot of radioactive material that some of it could have a good direction to go. But I'm not sure that it's going to be the best route to go, because maybe this company cleans that stuff up, but the next one coming along may not be as trustworthy.
Right. And I know a lot of the meetings that we've been to, there is, of course, they want to identify everything that they can that's in there so that they know what people have to start looking for, so they can start setting the standards that say, okay, these are all the things that you're going to have to look for. And so once you've got them identified, that, to me, that's the hardest part. And then after that, it's like now companies know what they have to be testing for.
Right. So what we're trying to do as a bit of market research and just research on what we're going to be dealing with in our our project is we're trying to get samples from disposal wells, but ideally from the well sites themselves, from pumpers, from all around the Permian Basin.
Yeah.
And test that water for everything in there and try to get a good constellation of data to see what regions and depths have what, what
to
elements in
identify
it.
Whether, what you can anticipate.
And find where the richer sort of veins are of different elements that we're
That's
after.
actually a great idea because you could, have somebody almost like we have for our soil. So you can go GIS, this is where I live. And we already know what the soil is there, and you can, see that. Yeah, that's actually a great idea.
So we're working on that. We're working on getting funding to buy an instrument called an ICP-MS. So it's an inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometer. Say that 10 times fast.
Okay.
Essentially, you could put a few drops of the water in there, and it ionizes it, push it down a tube, and it will tell you all of the elements that are in there and the concentration. So it's a nice, easy test. They're not cheap instruments, of course, to do something like that.
Right.
But that is one of the big things we want to do for testing that. Now, that won't tell us if there's phosphates or nitrates or certain, we call polyatomic ions, things that you may want to use for fertilizers or may want to use for, it won't necessarily tell us that. There's other tests we can do for that.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that Lacey, my colleague, and I feel like said, it's like, wait a second, there's some stuff in there that, like, if you're going to use it for agriculture, you might want to leave it in there.
Or extract it and sell it for agriculture.
Yes, right.
So the basic premise of what we're trying to do is have a philosophy of trying to use all the parts of the buffalo.
Okay.
I want to I want to go and
Mm-hmm.
selectively pull out each of the different elements out of the water and find a feedstock that we can make that into for other industries. Whether that be, there's tons of potassium in the water, so you can make potash fertilizers. So potash fertilizer prices have gone up 4 or 6 times, I think, since between the pandemic and the invasion of Russia and Ukraine.
Yes.
It's a large percentage of potash fertilizer comes from Russia.
Yes, it'd be nice to not have to be connected to them at all anymore.
Exactly.
Dependent.
And, we've got a lot of our precursor chemicals for the chemical plants we do have here in the U.S., especially on the Gulf Coast. A lot of those come from places like China, Russia, Indonesia, places like that are cheaper to produce them. But we saw during the pandemic how quickly our global trade system can break down, whether it be from a pandemic or a war or a natural disaster, or just poor relations, whatever it is. I think we need to have the capability here to do that stuff.
Well, absolutely. And we, I love what you said. It's like using the whole buffalo, which is what that means. Circular economies means there's no waste because we're making certain. And I think that was a quality that my grandparents would be your great grandparents. And before, I will tell you that we have an old trunk that was on my dad's side of the family, very, very old. And when the family, I don't know, it had been lost and someone found it or what, but they were all going through it. And there was an envelope. And on the outside of the envelope, it said pieces of string too short to be used. And that is, in fact, what was inside the envelope. That has gone away. And I'm as guilty as anybody, that I have too much stuff in my house and I buy too much stuff and everything is replaceable. But
especially people that didn't grow up in the Great Depression.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, it just feels like everything we have and everything we buy is disposable. And so we don't think about, how to, I'm trying to think about in those terms, and I think it's, we say here, people, planet, profits, that they can all be together. They can all coexist, and so that's really what, we want people to understand is that what was once waste, we're in such a time of extreme innovation and development that doesn't have to be waste anymore.
And things are growing so fast. I mean, the Permian Basin oil field has grown.
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
Immensely fast, especially with the increased use. Obviously, fracking, like we talked about, has increased the amount of water and oil produced, not because of the fracking, but because it produces more per area.
Yes.
Right? So we have more to deal with. But oil's not going away anytime soon.
A good portion of the oil and gas industry is very well aware of environmental impacts that they have. And there's always bad players everywhere that, we can't just turn off fossil fuels without doing some great harm to people.
Well, even aside from just the fuel aspect, most of our plastics, Most of our
we might should turn that part off though.
Fertilizers are drugs,
That's
medication.
true. Yeah.
A lot of the medical devices, things like that.
A lot of people don't understand. I saw such an interesting commercial that was playing in the Houston area, and it literally was like a couple going into an emergency room, and it was all the things that wouldn't be there without the fossil fuel industry, and it was like empty.
The paint on the wall, even.
Yes, everything. It was completely empty. Yeah. So, but to your point, I mean, we're really fortunate because we're right here.
And it's a problem for us.
Yes.
And why not let us find the solution to it?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And like Senator Perry's saying, like, hey, actually, I think this is a way that actually we can create more markets and bring in more business and revenue to our area. And I think so too. And I think if we can figure these things out, it's opportunities for some of these little small communities that kind of boom and bust along with the way that oil and gas used to do. I don't know that we'll see it like that anymore. It seems like it's a steadier pace than it's been in the past.
It seems to be because we're more independent of it. And I think we're not allowed to sell oil, like export it, at least minimally export it. So even if oil prices go through the roof outside the U.S., we still have enough to produce our own. I'm not sure that prices here will necessarily track those as strongly as they have
I
in the
don't know anything about that. I know our LNG goes overseas. I know that 90% of Poland's LNG comes from Texas. So, yeah, and I think we'll see better uses of that. We have so much.
We can't even refine it all.
We need to be using it.
Yeah, instead of just flaring it. I know sometimes
it's not good to flare it. No.
Sometimes driving to Big Springs, but over the last several years, it looked like you were on Star Wars Coruscant, the giant city planet. The bottom was just fire everywhere. So it looked like driving to Big Springs, just flames shooting up so far you can't hardly see the road from the glare.
Goodness.
There on 87, there were so many on the north side of Big Springs.
That must have been a while ago.
No, that was in the last 3-4 years. There's still some there. It's not as bad now.
No, because I think they're really cracking down on like flaring.
Yeah,
they don't like to do it, and they don't like for people to do it because of the emissions.
Well, the emissions, but also even that area, if you look around it, there's just black soot everywhere because it's not refined methane or natural gas. It's got everything in it.
No, I didn't. I don't know anything about this. So, yes.
So the reason they're flaring it is because they can't get it into the lines to go to the gas plants. Gas plants don't have enough refining capacity.
Yes, right. There's not.
Because those polypipe gas lines, they can't handle a lot of pressure, and they're not compressing it to be a liquid. It's not under a lot of pressure. It's under maybe, I don't know for sure, but maybe 60, 100 pounds of pressure. Okay. And that's not very much for, an 8 or 10 inch pipe. Like you can only fit so much in there. And if you've got, 1,000 wells
and also like if it's not worth anything, if it's like worth a negative, whatever,
why bother?
Why would you bother? You don't want to spend any money on it,
I haven't heard anything else about it, but during the pandemic, I heard about a team from A&M, some students at A&M, really wasn't based at A&M. They were setting up, they were taking sea containers and putting a motor in there with a generator that could run off the gas directly. So they were able to clean it up a little bit, and they were setting up Bitcoin miners.
Oh my goodness.
To use that flared gas, that gas that was going to be flared anyways, turning it into Bitcoin miners. And that seems like such a duh kind of thing to go do. Like, why didn't I think of that?
Right.
Especially sitting around doing nothing. You'd think that would have been an obvious thing. And that was when Bitcoin was really starting to climb.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. Well, we've talked about data centers and how much energy they are going to require.
I'm not so worried about the energy as the water.
Well, when you require energy, you require water.
So we don't have our process figured out completely. There's a lot of steps. Basically, we have to be able to refine everything.
Okay, so step back just a minute. Who is we?
Okay, so we're DJR Labs. So I'm one of the co-founders, me and my friends. We're still very early days.
Okay.
But called DJR Labs, Denton Jones Research Lab. So my friend's name's Nick Jones.
Okay.
We're working on trying to build this company to be able to take the water, use all the parts of it to produce whatever needs to be produced. That list would take more than this hour we have here.
Exactly.
And then out the back of that, since we're going after what's in the water, we don't want to leave anything behind. So through the course of this process, we should have relatively clean water. Water that's economical enough to clean up to use, whether that be for industrial cooling like data centers or agriculture, which agriculture is not consistent. You know, you don't water in the winter usually.
Yeah.
Right. So, but you could still sell to that. And it'd be harder, but ideally be able to sell to obviously industry, but to municipalities.
Yeah. Also in ag, we generally, you know, we pay our electricity. So, you know, I know I've had people ask me how much would farmers pay for it. I was like, we pay for everything else, like no more than what we're paying for electricity, probably, you know? So you just couldn't, I don't think that there's a way to add on another cost when you're already losing money.
No, if you were to sell it to farmers, you'd have to sell it cheap.
Oh,
right. It had to be really cheap. But the water quality maybe doesn't have to be as good as what you need for municipalities or what you need for a data center. Data center, if you're doing, cooling towers, you need really clean water because you'll get scale buildup. Because cooling towers work by evaporating all that water, like an old evaporative air conditioner.
Yes.
They evaporate all that water and all the salts that are in there have to go somewhere, but they're not going to evaporate. They just build up on the surfaces in there and on the pumps and inside the pipes, and you get fouling, and it causes a lot and fouling on the heat exchangers. Right. So really ideally you want really clean water. Now that doesn't always happen. They kind of go with what they got. But if you can have pretty clean water there to reduce their maintenance costs.
Well, if they come into this area, you know, this is like we got a whole lot of these are like a town without a toothache because we have so much minerals in our water. I'm like, if you're here, you're going to have to clean it up anyway. Yeah. Yeah.
And I would rather them not be taking from the groundwater because we don't have a lot of it.
We don't.
Lubbock has a lot more because they're on the Ogallala. Down in Big Spring and a lot of the Permian Basin, there's not a nice full aquifer.
Well, there's not a nice full aquifer here.
Well, it's not as full anymore.
We have, debatably, what I call Robert Mesa, our Texas water guru. He says we have about 30 years of irrigation left. So we just don't have a lot of water.
I saw a documentary, this was years ago, that the Ogallala, it goes up
all the way to the Dakotas.
Into Kansas and all of and they're taking something like 14 trillion barrels of water a year out of it for irrigation.
Well, a lot of those states are not like us, right? They're not a right of capture state. So they've put in some limitations and some economic incentives to help people, you know. So we'll see what happens here, you know.
I'm afraid we're going to have to go to that at some point. The oil field, especially in Big Spring, the oil field is using up the surface water as fast as they can. They finally started cleaning up some of the produced water to use, but they generally will blend it with the surface water. I say surface water, groundwater that's being pumped out.
Well, and I think it wasn't long ago that I heard that like Big Spring has like 10 years of municipal water left or something.
So
do you know?
I'm not sure now. Okay. They built a water reclamation facility there, I think in 2014 or somewhere around there. Okay. So they're able to take all the sewage and clean that water up to actually better than what went into the water system.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if they're now reusing it. At one point, they were doing that and flushing it down to into the greater water system.
Right. Yeah.
The CRMW, Colorado River Municipal Water District.
Okay.
Now they may be funneling it back into the water in the city and just keeping that in a circle. And then they can use all the waste for fertilizers and whatever they're going for.
Yeah.
So that extended the water significantly. And I think others, the people there were really grossed out by it at first, but it increased their water quality.
Yes.
Significantly.
I do know. I hear people, they're going to, eat organic food that has the same thing on it from a different mammal.
I've got a friend. They farm. They grow hay in around Eagle Mountain Lake in DFW area near Fort Worth.
Okay,
and they actually fertilize their hay with a cleaned up, they basically pasteurize human waste.
Okay.
That's been liquefied and sprayed on the crop. I don't think the neighbors are real happy about it because it doesn't smell very nice. But it's cheap.
neither does it if it comes from like the cow feed lot. It doesn't smell very good.
I think it smells worse when it's from people.
Ooh, let's not talk about that. Gross. So, but I think we're going to see more and more of that. You know,
absolutely.
And I know that like there are in Austin, like new buildings that are being built have to have water catchments on them, and even like evaporative anything, they have to catch all of it. And now they're just like, a lot of them are completely like self-sufficient. They're just cycling that water, cleaning it, cycling it all back through. Of course, it does rain there more than it does here.
Quite
of course,
a bit.
yeah. But enough of them have been doing that they've quit pulling from one of the rivers there. I think Robert and I visited about that when he was on. So, you know, they're showing, you know, that some of that, even if it just means I have enough water to water my yard, you know, so
and not have the water
stuff.
restrictions as badly.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Out here on the Texas plains, water is everything, and there's a resource that's as vital as it is fragile: our playa lakes. These lakes are nature's reservoir, catching rainwater to recharge our aquifer and provide lifelines for wildlife. But now they need our help. In collaboration with the Texas Playa Lakes Conservation Initiative and the Cargill Global Water Challenge, Sarah has started the Our Legacy is Tomorrow's Water initiative to inspire and work with landowners to restore and protect our playa lakes. Each playa we save helps secure a sustainable water future for the generations that will be coming after us. Whether it's improving soil health, restoring habitats, or recharging groundwater, we are committed to making a difference. Together, we can build a legacy that we can all be proud of. To learn how you can join in, visit the Playa Lakes Restoration Initiative page on the Sarah website. Let's keep Texas water flowing strong for the future. Visit sarah-conservation.com.
So that's one of the things we're hoping with the produced water, that, you know, West Texas kind of is limited on population growth by the water resources we have, because we're already really using too much.
Yes. Yeah.
And unless we can find a way to make it rain more,
right,
which is a whole other issue.
Yes. So
we have to get it somewhere else.
Can you give us any ideas of like, what are these end products that some of these things could go into?
So, obviously, things like potassium can be made into potash fertilizers, what we mentioned. Calcium can go into, we think, haven't tried it yet, and extensively think might have found a way to produce something, one of the components of Portland cement.
Okay.
Directly out of the water without going through a clinker reaction. So the clinker, when you produce cement, will heat. They'll take the inputs, they will heat them to, I think, like 1800 degrees Celsius for a day and get them to react. And it removes CO2 from the compound to create the compound that will then react with water and harden. So a lot of people complain that cement has a lot of, whatever your feelings are on greenhouse gas emissions stuff, it produces a lot, not just from the energy input, but it directly emits CO2 while you're making it.
While you're making it.
And then they go and crush it. But this is a way, I think I've been able to actually apply our work in crystals with the high explosives to it. So there's different polymorphs of the one of the crystals that it forms. From the compound that it makes. The compound's got a long name.
I'm just pretending I know what you're talking about. So
it's like a calcium silicate.
Gotcha.
Calcium and basically window glass. And calcium,
yes.
Sort of.
Well, that's in layman's terms. That's close enough for me.
Close enough.
Yes.
So normally you don't want it to get wet, right? Because it will set up.
Right. Yes.
Well, there are different forms of the crystal that have different solubilities in the water. So some of them will take water up and some won't. If we can, through the process, the chemical process, get it to crash out the right crystal directly from the water, then and if we have low enough water content, can get it out of the water fast enough, it won't have time to start reacting. And then we can go and put it into something like a ball mill and crush it and turn it into the right polymorph. That will then be one of the main components of Portland cement.
Interesting. Yeah, now that would be amazing. You going to be working on that in the next few years, you think?
Yes. Yeah. So that's, that's one of many things. So it's going to be one of the more complicated processes because we have to, not that specifically, but everything.
Yes. Everything, yes.
So we had to figure out what to do with the lithium and the potassium, the magnesium, and the sodium and the chlorine. The sodium and chlorine are the hardest to get rid of because they're the highest concentration. Sodium, you can make a good amount of stuff from it, and chlorine, you can make a good amount of stuff from it. So there's a lot of chlorine chemistry that can be done, but chlorine is pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
So, you know, the train derailment up in Ohio, was that last year or this year?
I think it was last year.
So they spilled vinyl chloride, which is the monomer precursor for PVC. So what they do, you take vinyl chloride and you polymerize it into polyvinyl chloride.
Okay.
And it's pretty safe to use, right? We use it for water, for everything. But when it's in that state, it's very volatile, can evaporate really easy, get into water, soluble a little bit. Goodness, and it's really nasty stuff. So I think that probably the Department of Transportation is going to start limiting or maybe eliminating transport of that material, at least the way they're doing it, because it's too dangerous.
Right.
I mean, one tanker going is enough to pollute a whole area for
goodness.
years.
So, wow.
So if we want to go that route of vinyl chloride, which we could do, you could take some of the natural gas that's basically free in Permian Basin, and make the vinyl chloride from it, and then go ahead and polymerize into PVC, and then sell it to the PVC producers to make whatever mixture they want.
Right, so you don't have to transport it.
Right, and you know, you can also make stuff like bleach. You can make stuff to use for swimming pool shock. You know, sodium hypochlorite, potassium perchlorate, sodium hypochlorite. So it's bleach and swimming pool chlorine. Okay. There's also ammonia salts, ammonium chloride salts, which they use those for water purifications. Like the city of Lubbock, I think uses an ammonium chloride based sterilization in their water.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask a question, and I'm not a chemical person, like at all. Microbes, like honestly, those are my favorite animals. Microbes, and I don't even know, because there's unlimited supply of them, and there's like no one knows how many there are, what they all are.
I think there's an infinite amount because there are always new ones being, mutating and being formed into whatever.
Yes. So I know that I have had microbiologists tell me that there is a microbe that will eat. If there's a chemical, there's a microbe to eat it.
Absolutely.
So is it possible in theory that you could test this water that is out here in the field? Let's just say, hypothetically, this is all hypothetical coming from someone who knows nothing about chemistry and only knows the word microbes. So you have on some land that I might own the minerals to. They want to drill. And so they start fracking. And now we have all this water. And we test this water that comes out, and we see, here's all of the list of all the things that are in here. And we have identified all the microbes that eat this list of all of these things. Could we grow those microbes, toss them into that water, and then they would eat it and clean it up?
Well,
is it that simple?
And no.
Of course it's not.
Well, yes and no. So you would have to then take the microbes out.
Right.
Because if they eat it and then die, it's still there.
Right.
It doesn't go anywhere.
But would it be,
so you have to be able to filter them.
Would it be easier to filter microbes than to filter all those things?
Absolutely. Because they're micro scale critters, right? You know, they're 1 to maybe 10 microns across. Micrometers. So that'd be a tenth. You know,
there's like hundreds of thousands of them in like a teaspoon of dirt. So like, there's lots of them. Yeah.
So you could absolutely do that, and it's something I've been mulling around a little bit. Is a way to use some of these to actually concentrate certain kinds of elements from the water.
Yes.
So if you grow them in the water, so something I've been thinking about, if you could grow them in the water, and then especially if you could get them to export them out of their cell in a reduced form, meaning that it's metallic. Well, it depends on the element, but so something like magnesium, for example. If you could get a bacteria that would take in magnesium, which is not hard to do because magnesium is a central atom in chlorophyll. You need magnesium for chlorophyll to photosynthesis for anything.
I do know about that. I was paying attention then.
So if you could get it to then take that magnesium and add a couple of electrons to it and spit it out, you would have metallic magnesium. Right now, to produce there's different processes, but to produce metallic magnesium, you normally have to, again, it depends on what you start with, but you'll have to generally heat something like magnesium oxide or magnesium chloride to temperatures well over 1,000 degrees Celsius, which is very energy intensive. And then you've got to, depending on what you're doing, pass different gases or mix it with other things. And it makes magnesium metal fairly expensive. That's why magnesium is more expensive than, say, aluminum. It's why we build our airplanes more out of aluminum than out of magnesium.
Oh, okay.
So magnesium and aluminum make good alloys, and they will add magnesium to the aluminum.
Okay.
Because it's actually lighter than aluminum.
Okay.
And has different structural properties, of course. But you could theoretically make more stuff that makes stuff more magnesium based instead of aluminum based and save weight.
Interesting.
For similar strengths.
Right. Huh.
So that's something I came up with the idea. That would have been in 2016 to start trying to work on that, but I haven't got to. So I did a program at Tech called iGEM. It's a International Genetically Engineered Machines. It's an international competition that we had a group.
Okay.
And basically you have to take a bacteria and engineer it to do something.
That is super cool.
Yeah. So we made it.
Because bacteria are microbes.
So we were using E. coli. So so a very safe E. coli.
Oh, okay.
So there's different kinds.
Not the bad kind.
Not the pathogenic.
Okay. The one in the white hat, not the black hat.
Exactly.
Okay. Gotcha.
So you can take the stuff that makes them dangerous out. And
okay.
E. coli is one of the most studied bacteria there is.
Okay.
They use it in labs for everything.
Okay.
So our group, in 2016, we engineered it to produce platelet-derived growth factor beta, which is a human-derived growth factor that's normally found, I think, in your blood cells.
Yes.
Platelet-derived growth factor.
Yes, I've
blood
heard
platelet.
of that. Right.
So we were working on a wound healing model. So we would take collagen and we would make collagen from the liquid. We would solidify it. And in there, we were trying to take these aprotein, we also produce, and PDGF beta, derived growth factor beta, and basically put a little lasso on it, I guess, and hold it on there so it didn't float around your body.
Okay.
Because it'll start causing cancer if it's
lovely.
If there's too much of it everywhere, right? But you want it where you want it. So the collagen would be a scaffold, extracellular matrix for your cells to proliferate up into.
Okay.
So if you had a cut or diabetic patients or burn patients. You put this on there and you leave it and it becomes their skin. Because your body normally fills with collagen. That's what your structure is made of. Usually is elastin and collagen. So this would cut some of the steps
healing
out.
Time in. Oh, wow.
So that was what we worked on. We only had a summer to work on it, basically. We were able to get it to produce PDGF beta, though I'm not sure we were able to get crystal studies to make sure it was the right conformation, but we're able to make it produce it. And if that had kept going right now, that stuff's very, very expensive. I think a milligram of it is like $10,000.
Wow.
Or something. I mean, this would have, it's one of the more expensive things you can buy out there. So we were able to produce it pretty easily.
Wow.
And filter it. So my part of it was working on the collagen scaffold itself and in a bioreactor to be able to go and separate them. And we had a separation process and all. But during that, when we were trying to decide what project we wanted to do, my suggestion was we try to make magnesium. And if you could, even if you just got it to selectively isolate magnesium, that would have been a big improvement to take it from water. So in Holland, they've got their fresh water has some of the highest magnesium levels in the world. So if you want to produce magnesium, you could turn Holland suddenly into magnesium production facility. And it doesn't take anything bad out of their water.
Right.
It wouldn't hurt their water.
Yes.
You don't need that much magnesium in it. So that was
interesting.
Still I have in the back of my mind all the time, but I'm not the molecular biochemist, right? Like that's not. So I know a lot about it, but I'm not enough to go and do it. Or synthetic biologist.
I had a conversation with a guy that's he's just studied microbes and fungus and mushrooms and all of that stuff for so many years, and so we were talking about he's the one who said if there's a chemical, there's a microbe that eats it, and it immediately went, in theory, couldn't you do this?
They're also working. We went to a conference in Houston a couple years ago, and there was a company there. They had already started going to market a little bit with these facilities that you could add it on to the output CO2 from a burning whatever, coal or natural gas, whatever it is in your process. Take that CO2 and using different bacteria, they were able to produce things like acetone, acetaldehyde, different solvents.
Okay.
And the bacteria itself would eat basically eat CO2 and secrete these other
elements.
Other
well,
compounds.
That was the other thing is I thought too, well, I guess you wouldn't have to just know what they ate, but what are they also going to, they're going to take this in, but what's the output? And is that going to be a problem with what they put out?
So if you were trying to just isolate all these elements from it, you would probably want them to hold on to it.
Yes,
and then
you would.
You filter them out and shred them basically. And then refine it. So at least you've had it concentrated. So there's more ways than you can imagine to concentrate different elements and different salts and stuff. So it's kind of a daunting task.
Yes, I have been more lost in this conversation than I have been in one in a long time. When I saw chemical engineering, I was like, oh no, I don't even know I don't even know what I don't even know. But I'm glad you're doing this though, because I know that there's a lot of produced water. And there's a lot of things in it, and the things that are in it, and what we're going to do with them is going to mean either we're going to make a mess or we're going to make money.
Yeah.
So
why not make money?
Yes.
Even if ideally, if you do this, you don't need the Railroad Commission to come in and regulate the water's issues. The money will follow it there. And where I think probably this will work best is scale.
Yes.
So if we can put 3 or 4 very large facilities and pipeline on this water to it, that will make it efficient enough to be worth doing. If you tried to put this complicated of a process at every single disposal site, they're not big enough, but the economies of scale just don't work.
So do you already have the process?
We're working on it. I'm only one person.
So in the
there's
process,
thousands of things we could make.
Yeah, right. So you know what's there, and you're trying to figure out like what's the process, what's the best process. So now here's a dumb question. You're going to have, so in my mind, this is how it looks. I'm going to have a pile of salt. I'm going to have a pile of lithium. I'm going to have a pile of whatever. Is that kind of like what you're thinking about of it? Or is like
more or less. So, with say lithium, depending on how you want to sell it, you may need metallic lithium, or lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide. Those are the sort of the 3 main ones that get used in battery technologies.
Right.
They have to be really high purity to use in those processes. I mean, I think with lithium carbonate, depending on the type of battery you're looking at, even a 1% or even maybe a 0.5% contamination will start causing, you call dendritic growth or dendrites. So you basically flat, or it could be spherical, crystals that are that grow into it. And what they do is they go and arc across the electrodes and ruin short out the cell. So that you have a little solid will start growing. It'll start crashing out into a crystal. So they had to be really high in purity. Lithium metal, on the other hand, is a little bit easier to purify. So it just depends on the
that's right there. Okay, so do you have to have a process to remove every different chemical?
Had to move every element from.
Should you say element? Is that what you should say? Is that
from
the
this? Yeah, probably. Okay. Well, so if there's say phosphate, which use phosphate fertilizers, ideally we want to pull the phosphate out because we can use it that way, as opposed to just phosphorus. There may be just phosphorus in the water.
Literally, so
phosphate.
that I mean, like it is so complicated because it's not like desalinization.
Right.
You have one element you're taking out.
Just all the salts. Basically, desalination, you're just taking the water out. You can think of it that way.
That's actually
taking the water out of the salts.
Right. You're taking the water out of salts. So, but this is like, now we're going to take all the salt out. Now we're going to take all the lithium out. Now we're going to you can't just have one way to filter all of this out at one time.
No. Well, you can filter it all out at one time, but it's all going to be together.
Well, yeah, right.
But that doesn't help us.
Yeah, and then you have to sort it. It's it's like kind
of
like taking everything out of my closet all at once instead of like pulling one thing out and putting it in a box. And you
can probably think of it as if I had a bucket of sprinkles that are all different colors, or glitter that's all different colors, and I spread it all around your block.
Holy
and you
cow.
have to separate all the red ones out and all the purple ones out. Separate.
That is a really good. I was going to go for Skittles, but the glitter, that is a very, that really helps with the picture of the mind of what we're dealing with.
It's immensely complicated to do.
Yes.
It's entirely possible. Each of those processes already exist in some form or another. So I don't necessarily have to come up with all the new processes, but the overall
you have to,
process.
but like, okay, so if you
them.
say you have to basically have a place where all of those processes are available in one location.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be a very large, sprawling facility. I imagine.
Yes, and I mean, I've heard 12 to 20 million for a medium size facility is what I have heard.
For what we're imagining, I'm probably going to say closer to $1 billion to build a facility.
And we'd probably need more than one of those.
I figure maybe 2 or 3 in the Permian Basin.
Yeah.
For that size. The Permian Basin right now, some of this water is used for water flooding, like we talked about before, to try to push the oil. So they're going to keep injecting it. But Permian Basin wise, they're pushing up somewhere between 3 to 5 billion barrels a year back in the ground. So just think about it. If you say you have 4 of them, you got to deal with 1 billion barrels a year. So 42 billion gallons a year of water. And then you've got to pick at it, sort of.
Yes.
And you have to deal with the solids that come in because it's not just water. There'll be sand. There's different kinds of silts, sometimes little gravel. There's all kinds of solids that are in there. Sand is a big one that potentially you could find use for, but you got to decontaminate it.
So do you have any idea, like, let's just say, what is the average amount of these elements? Like on average, there's 20 different, or on average, there's 100 different, or on average, there's 1,000 different.
As far as ones that we'll care about that'll be high enough concentration to mess with.
Yes, right. Okay.
Probably 30 to 50 at the most.
Okay.
So, if so cobalt, for example.
Yes.
Be really nice if cobalt was in that water, but it's not going to be. The solubility of cobalt is so low, even with different extra elements added in, unless the water comes in really acidic or has some chelation agent essentially in it that makes that able to float around the water. It's not going to be there.
So is it possible that as all of this water comes in, that some of these, because it's going to be coming in from all different areas, so that some of these elements will dilute.
Oh, yeah.
Even more and more.
And that'll be one of the things we have to worry about and decide is, do we commingle all the water and try to have a consistent concentration, which is probably the route we'll go, because it's a lot easier to design for a known input than to design a facility that can handle 1,000 different concentrations of each thing. That would be really... Now, I'm not saying it's impossible. The way we're working on growing AI that can work in process control, it would be entirely possible for it to be able to predict what needs to happen for each of these
I
stages.
can see that because here's how I vision it. I vision it as a lumber yard. So the log comes in and it is measured like in milliseconds at thousands of points. And then it tells the saw exactly how to cut it. How you get the most money out of that single log through what cuts, and then it spins it and turns it around and gets it in the right position and cuts it.
It's possible. It just,
there you go.
The thing is that some things at different concentrations, that process won't work at a low concentration or at a high concentration.
Right.
So depending on what we're doing, so if you're using membranes for parts of it, like an RO membrane you may have in your house, there's different stages of it, of course. There's the stages for like nanofiltration, ultrafiltration, as opposed to RO filtration. Those actually are able to separate ions based on charge. So if you remember back to chemistry, your periodic table,
yeah, but okay.
Your first column has a +1 charge, and the second column +2 charge.
Okay.
So there's different valent electron numbers of it when it's dissolved in water. So things in that first column like sodium, lithium, potassium in a nanofiltration membrane should be pushed in one stream and everything else into another stream. So it's possible to do some separations that way with selective on size and on the physical size of the element and on the charge of the element. So a lot of that can be done that way, but when you go through those membranes, you can't have really high concentrations to begin with.
Right.
That's why you have what you call recycle stream in a lot of RO systems. It'll take the clean water and mix it with the concentrated water coming in, and you have
right. So
have it right.
It dilutes it down to the right amount that it can deal with.
So if you're using that, you don't want it concentrated. But if we want to use something where we try to crash stuff out with temperature or by adding, something to make it crash out, another salt that will, push. So if you had if you had a lot of lithium chloride dissolved in the water, in water, and you added a lot of sodium carbonate.
Okay.
So kind of like baking soda, but
yes,
it's similar to baking soda, but it's not quite. If you add a lot of that to the water, you'll crash out lithium carbonate.
Okay.
Because the lithium carbonate is less soluble than sodium carbonate.
Okay.
Right. So you can add stuff to crash it out and have a solid that you can then go and physically filter out.
We're going to call this episode chemistry, not 101.
102 at least.
Yes, at least. And I missed 101 completely.
So, things like that, you want high concentrations.
Okay.
Whether if you want to do it temperature. So part of the reason you get a lot of scale buildup, if you have high concentrations of salt in your water at home and you get scale buildup on certain surfaces, is partly like in your hot water heater.
Yes.
Your water heater will fill
if
with...
you're in Lubbock.
Yes. Your water heater will fill with gunk. Right.
Yes.
So a lot of things like calcium carbonate, which is what coral is made of. That's their main skeleton is calcium carbonate. It is less soluble as the water gets hot. So, right. You think of like when you dissolve sugar in your tea or something, if it's hotter water, you can dissolve more sugar. And that's how most things work. But some things are the opposite. And so hot surfaces, like the element in your hot water heater, it precipitates on the surface because it's hotter right there than the rest of it. Right? So that's a method you can use for crashing certain things out, is make it hotter or colder depending on your concentration.
So I think that to sum it all up, this is going to take a lot of research and a lot of work.
A lot of money.
And a lot of money. But according to Senator Perry, we're going to make it happen.
Good.
So he is very passionate about it and getting this produced water, making it available. So
sounds like somebody I need to get in contact with.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, you need to listen to the podcast, and he's really been a big advocate for us and for water, like really bringing that. Why we have to bring it to people's attention, I don't know, but he has done that, so.
Got to get the public behind you.
Yes. Yeah. And the legislature, he's done a lot of work there too. So, well, this has really been very, very enlightening. I feel like I have been to school today and I enjoyed it. I always like to learn things, but now people are going to know how dumb I really am. Well, folks, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Aric Denton. Aric, thanks for being here.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. If you like what you hear and you feel like you're learning something, we'd love for you to give us a share, give us a like. You can even go to our website and donate if you would like to do so. All of the information and Aric's information will all be available in the show notes. I'm your host, Tillery Timmons-Sims, and I look forward to being with you again on another episode of Conservation Stories.